Welcome back to episode 165 of the Sports Marketing Machine podcast, powered by Revelocity Sports, the podcast that helps you sell more tickets, sell more merchandise, and grow your fan base. I'm your host, Jeremy Nizer. Today we're talking about something that every sports team deals with at some point during the season. Major league level, minor league level, some are collegiate, professional, whatever it is. At some point, sports teams deal with this at some point during the season, but almost nobody likes to talk about it publicly. You're about 6 weeks into the season, maybe halfway through, and you sit down and you start looking at your numbers, your pacing report, and you realize we're behind. Not just like one bad Tuesday behind. I mean like kind of behind where small improvements may not actually save the season anymore, and you will not be hitting your goals. That is a very difficult moment for organizations, because once teams realize they're behind pace, most immediately go in panic mode. Boost more posts, run more giveaways, discount tickets, spend more on ads, send more emails. Like, we've all heard this and seen this, but the reality is, if you're significantly behind halfway through the season, incremental growth may actually not be enough. So today I'm going to talk through how smart teams evaluate where they really are, how they diagnose what's actually happening, and how you should think strategically about the rest of the season if numbers say that you are in trouble. Because sometimes the answer is to, optimize things, and sometimes the answer is you need an entire different strategy the rest of the way. So let's get into it. The first thing teams need to understand is not all behind pace situations are equal. Being 5% behind pace is very different than being 25% behind pace. But a lot of teams emotionally treat those exactly the same way. So I like to think about this in actually 3 different buckets. Slightly behind, maybe 5 or 10% behind. Honestly, depending on how your schedule is, what's transpired the beginning part of the year, what you have coming up the second half of the year, this is actually pretty normal for a lot of teams because weather happens. Bad weekends happen, school schedules shift, a couple promotional nights maybe underperformed. This is usually optimization territory, not I'm going to panic territory. Maybe your creative is a little bit stale, your urgency is weak, maybe your targeting's off, your retargeting has slowed down, your messaging just simply isn't connecting. Those, my friend, are fixable. Bucket number 2, moderately behind. This is like the 10 to 20% range. Things are getting a little bit more serious because you now need to create better, stronger campaigns, better be intentional with your spending, better positioning, and even you need some meaningful wins. Like you need, no pun intended, you need some home runs on some things to really get yourself back where you need to be. This is where organizations need to stop hoping and start diagnosing. Because in some situations, in conversations I've had with teams, they're 20% down and they're like, hey, I'm hoping this event kicks butt. I'm hoping that event kicks butt. I'm hoping this giveaway's great. I'm hoping group sales kicks butt on these. Like a lot of hoping happens and like you're not going to recover on hope, right? You need to start diagnosing how you're going to be able to get back to where you need to. You can still recover, but it probably won't happen accidentally, and it probably won't happen with you hoping things happen and take place, right? If you're hoping that your group sales team kicks butt a little bit more, like that's a big difference than, hey, my group sales typically is this. If we can squeeze out a different 10% more, like we're going to be in a different shape. You're hoping they perform above average. But if you're hoping they do X or they're doing Y, that's a totally different conversation. And that goes the same for single game tickets as well. All right, the bucket 3. the danger zone. And I'm not talking Tom Cruise danger zone here. We're talking like 20 to 30% behind pace. This is where organizations have to be brutally honest with themselves. Because if you're down 25% halfway through the season, you're probably not fixing that with better graphics, one more email or 6 more emails, or slightly better meta ads. The math is getting difficult, and that's the uncomfortable reality of where a lot of teams avoid. They think, well, we're not going to do the math here, but we know we need to make up for it somewhere, so we're just going to turn on more ads, or we're going to do X, we're going to do Y. If you are that significantly behind pace halfway through the season, you probably need some major wins. You need some nights to pop off that you're expecting to do X and they do Y. You need some partnerships to kind of push you over the edge. You really need something to take off like a rocket. And more importantly, you probably need a major shift in your advertising strategy. You don't need incremental improvements. You need a whole lot of major wins and some things that really take off like a rocket. Don't let the emotion of all of this lie to you. Before teams panic, this is where good tracking and pacing becomes incredibly important. Because one of the biggest mistakes an organizations make in evaluating the season emotionally instead of operationally. You have one bad crowd and suddenly everybody thinks the sky's falling. Or you have one huge fireworks night and everybody thinks everything's fixed. Neither is usually true. Most experienced teams are tracking their pacing daily, which means they have a spreadsheet with every single day of from the beginning you start putting ticket sales on sale to the last day of the season. It's every single day, and they're tracking group sales or single game ticket sales online and walk up, right? They're pacing and tracking day by day so they know exactly where they are versus last year versus their goal. So they're tracking that way. I'm going to put a link in the show notes if you're interested in downloading a template. I can easily put one together for you. I'll have it in there. It's just an Excel template that you haven't thought about doing it this way, but if you're pacing things and you're looking, where are we here? Where are we there? Like, it's going to be a little bit difficult, specifically for baseball teams and hockey teams and soccer teams, because you may play this Friday, but last year's schedule, you played this Friday, last Friday. So you're a Friday behind, right? So you could always get all mixed up and messed up at that point, which is understandable. But if you're looking day versus day, we are 31 days into selling single game tickets versus 31 days of selling single game tickets last year. This is where we're pacing. We're 3% or 5% behind, but if I look at it, we haven't had 2 Fridays. They're coming up that we already had, right? So that's the second part. The first part is you have to know your numbers, and it's inside of a spreadsheet. So I'm going to provide you with a link in the show notes with just a template. It's just going to be a template that you can easily update. It's going to have every single day. It's going to have online sales, walk-up sales, and then where you are for your goal. So you'd have to input your goal, and it will calculate where you should be every single day in order to hit your goals. Now, of course, you're going to sell more online and walk up on the day of the game. On a Tuesday when you don't have a game, you're not going to sell that much. But that is supposed to be pacing day versus day of where you are. So what this does is you're not emotional. You're not doing it game by game or promotions. You're doing it daily, because these daily pacing trackers give you sales goals to date, attendance pacing to date, revenue projections to date, everything in there in one spot. So you don't get caught up in, hey, this promotion's got to do this, or this person's got to do that, or I got to do this, or Hopin's that. You do it day by day. Your life is going to be so much easier because you know exactly where you are at every single day. Because the reality is, not all schedules are created equally, just like I mentioned earlier. And honestly, this tracker will tell the truth because it's day by day. Not one crowd, not one promotion, not one giveaway. That typically tends to tell the truth when you've got it day by day. Now, of course, I'm not discounting that context. Context still matters. So if you play this Friday and last year you played the Friday before and you're behind 10% on sales, like that's context. All of that matter, right? Are we actually in trouble in that situation? Probably not, because you have a Friday game coming up and you're 10% behind versus your Friday that was there. Like, you would potentially make that up with that. So the context absolutely matters. So are we actually in trouble, or we're simply pacing differently because of the schedule? For example, for a lot of teams, soccer, baseball, and even for some hockey teams, because of the weather, it can impact some stuff. So if you're in Beloit, Wisconsin, April and May, you might get crushed because it is cold and rainy and winds. So you might have a bad weekend. Or you're in Everett, Washington, and it rains in the beginning part of the season, or it's really cold. Like, that matters. So backloading their inventory and their promotional schedule to the games where they know they're going to be gangbusters, that's how they do it. They think about things a little bit differently, right? Some teams are like, we're going to front load because we have marvelous weather in California in April and May. After July 4th, it's 100 degrees every single day, and it's really hard. So they front load their promotion. So really, you also have to understand what's happening in your community, and because of that, context really matters. So maybe your strongest games are still ahead of you. Maybe those are your fireworks nights, your giveaway nights, your concerts, your weekends, holiday games. All of those things matter. Weekday, weekend balance, like I had mentioned earlier, because if you've got a bunch more day games or midweek games in the front half of the year versus the back half, like that absolutely matters versus your second half of premiums and Saturdays and so on and so forth. So you may not be in as much trouble as you think. Good teams don't just evaluate where they are today, they evaluate what inventory, what opportunities are still remaining. Because a team that's down 15% with 12 Saturdays left and the summer inventory ahead and premium dates remaining is very different than a team that's down 15% that most of their weekends have already taken place, school starting and coming on up. They don't have great promotions historically or great games historically the rest of the way. That is huge difference, and that nuance absolutely matters. This is where experienced operators separate themselves from emotional organizations, because eventually, even after accounting for the weather, remaining inventories, the schedule structure, some teams still realize, we're in trouble. We are legitimately behind. And that's when real strategic decisions begin. So, this is a saying that I learned my first year in sports as a sales guy. You can't prescribe until you diagnose. So I'm trying to sell sponsorships, and I'm like, you need billboards, you need all these different things, without actually doing some sort of needs assessment. And the comment that my boss said, David Haas, Hickory, North Carolina, 2001, said, what doctor is going to prescribe something to you until they diagnose you? Same exact concept here. You can't prescribe something until you diagnose exactly what's happening. And this is exactly where teams mess things up. They react emotionally before diagnosing what the actual problem is, and that usually leads to panic marketing. Discounted tickets, we're going to throw more ads, we're going to send out a whole bunch more emails, we're going to do a whole bunch more. But you have to, before you react, you actually have to ask yourself, are we really behind? Is it because ticket sales are down? Is that the diagnosis? That may be the symptom, but you got to walk through a few different possibilities of why ticket sales are down. That's the symptom. That's what's happening, right? The possibilities, the reasons why that's the problem could be a few different things. Could be, number one, awareness is down. Sometimes people literally don't know games are happening. I work with a lot of summer collegiate baseball teams that don't spend any money on social media ads, aren't promoting themselves as actively on social media. To their defense, they simply don't have enough staff members to do a lot of these things or the budget to allocate to do it, right? So the biggest problem that a lot of these teams have is teams literally, the fans literally don't know when the games are happening. Maybe the reach is down. Maybe their engagement is down. Their content volume has slowed down. They're not creating videos as they should. Media coverage has disappeared. Early part of the season, you get a lot of TV coverage because they're talking about the new season and exciting things happening. And then it just kind of disappears as the season goes on. Or your ad spend. You've maybe spent more than you should have in the front half of the season. And you're looking back going, uh-oh, I'm behind pace and I spent more than I should. Like, that happens, right? So there's low impressions, weak traffic to your website, poor engagement, and declining video views. All of that's an awareness problem, right? Problem number 2 is people are seeing the ads, but they just simply don't care. This one is a huge one, and it's actually a gut punch if you think about it, right? You're getting clicks, you're getting impressions, you're getting traffic to your website. You're looking at it and going, apples to apples, at this point last year, middle of May versus this point last year, middle of May, my traffic is up 20%, but people aren't buying. That means your positioning is weak, your call to actions are weak, or the offer isn't compelling, the theme nights aren't interesting, the creative isn't selling the experience, or the urgency isn't strong enough. And this is where teams confuse activity with effectiveness. Hey, the ad got a bunch of clicks. We got a lot of traffic. My biggest question to you is, that's great. How many tickets did we sell? You got all these people to the website. You got 1,000 people to your website. How many people bought tickets? That's the real question, because at the end of the day, clicks don't pay your bills. People in your stands do. People at your games do. Those are the ones that pay the bills. Clicks, impressions, they don't pay the bills. Traffic to your website doesn't pay the bills. Selling tickets pays the bills. Selling merchandise pays the bills. All of those things about getting people to purchase what you have, that's what pays the bills. All right, problem number 3, certain games are struggling. Is everything struggling, or is it just Tuesdays? Or is it just Sundays? Is it low demand opponents? And this happens in hockey a little bit, or even in soccer. Is it because we have school nights, our day games are down because our education day games are down, right? Because patterns absolutely matter. Because if fireworks are still crushing it, let's just say you're a baseball team, fireworks are crushing it, or your Friday soccer match still crushes it, or your Saturday, those things are great, they still crush it, right? Or your Saturdays are still kicking butt and performing. Your premium nights are still moving a lot of inventory, right? Maybe your issue isn't your brand. Maybe the issue is your low demand inventory strategy. And that's a completely different problem, right? Problem number 4, and this is a humorous one, the more I kind of did research and wrote about this one, is that your assumptions were wrong. This is one of the hardest conversations, but also kind of interesting ones that organizations have to face. Sometimes the assumptions entering the season didn't plan out. Sometimes you just say, hey, I expect X to do this, I expect Y to do this, and I expect this to do this, right? You assume the team would do this. You assume this promotion would hit. You assume this promotion, this giveaway would do this. You assume meta ads would do this, but the market responded differently. We all set goals in the beginning part of our season. We need to do X, we need to do Y, we need to do this. We have a pretty good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and incrementally get better. And sometimes those goals or assumptions fail. They just do. Simply, they fail. That doesn't mean that your staff is horrendous or terrible. It just means your strategy needs to be adjusted. But you have to admit it first to say, you know what? It's time to double back around and adjust our strategy. Because that's exactly what you're facing when you had all of these assumptions early part of the season and they simply didn't pan out. So the hard question, if you're in this situation, you're in minor league baseball, or you're in, I think soccer's still playing right now, or maybe you're in some sports that are getting going and you're already looking at it going, gosh, we're just not where we need to be. Here's the hard question. Can you actually make it up? This is the hardest conversation in the entire episode here. And this is where teams need to think about it mathematically, not emotionally. Because if you're behind pace, you need to understand how you would actually recover. And that is an important stat. The important stat here that I want to share is that roughly 82% of single game buyers don't return the following season. This is for minor league baseball. This is also for some other sports. Hockey, it's a little bit better than that, in the 60 to 65% range. But for minor league baseball and even summer collegiate teams, 80 to 85% of your single game buyers do not return the following season. Now, I'm not going to go down the retention rabbit hole today. That's a totally different episode. But I want to bring that up for one reason. You probably do not have this giant hidden reserve of buyers just sitting there waiting to magically save your season. Meaning, if you're significantly behind pace, you probably cannot manufacture massive demand overnight of new buyers. That's the reality. So now you have to ask yourself, what type of team are we right now? Can we optimize our way back into it? I mean, these are close enough. We've got some strong inventory remaining. We've got some still premium dates. And you see a clear path for improvement and the ability to make up for it, right? These teams that you see a way to kind of optimize things to get there, right? You got good dates coming on up. You're just a little bit behind. You've got some strong things that you think are going to be happening. You've got some opportunity to make some optimizations on your ads or to make some tweaks in your emails because maybe open rates are down or clicks are down, right? So we got to get opens to get clicks, to get people to the website, to get buys. So you're looking at your emails and you're thinking through that as well, right? You should focus on creative refreshments, stronger urgency, better retargeting, tighter offers, better subject lines in your email, bounce back offers, improved follow-up, right? That's kind of tightening the machine, if you will. You're getting better at what you've got because you've got some things kind of happening that you just got to get better. You got to tighten things to make that happen. So you got to get your creative looking better subject lines so you get people to open those, better offers. You really got to tighten things up. Or you might fall into this bucket. We need some massive wins. You got to get aggressive. You really do. This is where you really need some sponsor-supported nights, community partnerships. You need group sales to be just slaying it and getting after it and really figure out how you're going to get some momentum. If you've got some sort of influencers or community activations, you need them to be kicking butt. You got to figure out how you can get some sort of large-scale thing happening. You got to turn on some major experiential things. You really got to get creative, and you're going to have to grind. Because this concentrated, intentional, impact here, you're going to be able to get there, right? You really are going to have to grind to get there. We got to tweak a little bit here on my ads. I got to get better subject lines. I got to do a little bit there, right? This one is we're going to have to grind this out because in order for us to get to where we need to get to, based on what we've got ahead of us and what's already happened behind us, we're going to have to grind. And that's where a lot of these creative ideas will come from. And now we get to number 3. We need to protect the rest of the season. This is the conversation almost nobody in sports wants to have. I remember, story time here. I remember when I was working for the River Cats, I sat down with Alan Ledford. I was running the promotions for it. And he looked at my budget in the middle of May for my promo team, and we were talking through it, and I had almost spent my entire yearly budget on employees at that point in the season. Halfway through the season, I've almost spent the entire employee budget. So we look at this one and we say, you know what? How do we save this? How do we make this work? We really had to get creative the rest of the way. Was I over budget ending the season? Yes. Did Alan and the team help me kind of fix things and get and right the ship? Absolutely. But that was something that we looked at and say, you know what? We can save the season. We can protect the budget. We can protect things by actually kind of sitting down and being strategic the rest of the way in a lot of other different ways. So I use that example of how I was overspending from an employee perspective in this one here. The moral of that story is we need to protect the rest of the season, because trying to save the season may actually hurt you next year, but you have to make an effort to save it, because we don't want to over discount things. We don't want to train fans to wait. We don't want to destroy the pricing. We don't want to give away inventory. We don't want to burn the budget. Sometimes the smartest move is to protect your margins, to grow your database, to improve the experience, to test some ideas, and set yourself up stronger for next year. I'm not saying you're quitting. I'm not saying you're giving up. I'm not saying you throw your towel in and just say, you know what, we're so far behind, we're not going to make it up. Like, it's easy to throw out discounts at those points. It's easy to do all these things. But if you say, you know what, in order to set myself up better for next year, I need to grow my database. I need to improve the experience. I need to protect the margins so we can finish the best that we possibly can, all things considered. That's not quitting. That is being strategic with your thinking. So what should you do the rest of the way? Let's finish this episode on a practical point. If you're slightly behind, focus on optimizing campaigns, refreshing your creatives, updating your subject lines, tightening up your urgency and call to actions, improving your follow-ups, getting your salespeople to follow up with people. Maybe they don't follow up with people for 3 weeks. Maybe you tighten it up to 2 weeks. You really need to improve your follow-up, retargeting a little bit better, and then maximize your premium dates. Like, double down on your premium dates. Your group salespeople need to be doubling down on these premium dates. You don't need to panic. You need sharper, tighter execution. If you are moderately behind, you need stronger offers, a more concentrated budget allocation. You need bigger moments. You need the community to get involved somehow, some way, and that could be through influencers or community partnerships or sponsorship. You need to be more intentional with your planning. You need impact, not just activity. So you need impact. You need people to your website. Don't get me wrong. You need people buying tickets. That's honestly what you need. If you are significantly behind, stop chasing the vanity attendance. A half-full stadium on a heavily discounted tickets is not always a win. At this point, maximize your remaining premium nights. Protect the long-term value of your organization. Grow your attendance and your audience intelligently by growing your database, and avoid emotional decisions that will damage your future seasons. It's kind of like if you're investing in the stock market and it plummets and you say, oh no, it plummeted and I'm going to sell all my stock. Like, you're riding a roller coaster during the season. You don't want to pull it out even if it dips, because it's bound to go back up at some point, right? Because in this case here, because sometimes the smartest strategy is not save the season at all costs, it's making sure the next season starts from a stronger position. All right, every episode I give you the main takeaways. Here are the main takeaways from this episode. Not all behind pace situations are created equal. 5% behind is very different than 25% behind. Good teams track their pacing daily, not emotionally, not promo by promo. They evaluate sales trends, their inventory remaining, their schedule structure, and revenue pacing, because context matters, but more importantly, they're tracking their pacing day by day by day. Diagnose before you react. Diagnose before you react, because the symptom is lower ticket sales. The actual problem could be awareness, positioning, targeting, inventory, promotion, or failed assumptions. Number 4, incremental growth does not always solve major pacing issues. Sometimes you need a home run. Sometimes you need concentrated impact. I need everybody in this office calling all the churches in the area because I really want to sell out this faith and family night later in the year. That is a concentrated impact. I want everybody to call all the schools in the area because we want to sell out these day games, these education days. I want everyone to call all the painters in the community because we're going to do a painter appreciation night and we're going to offer them buy one, get one, whatever it is. Right? Concentrated impact will win in this situation, or a strategic pivot. Number 5, don't let panic destroy future value. Don't let your panic today destroy your opportunity to make more money and sell more tickets next year. Over discounting and desperation marketing can create long-term problems. I remember listening to David Sawyers, who was the marketing director for Chick-fil-A, and he talked about how they would do a giveaway. And then the next year, they had to match that day's sales this year. And it would be impossible if they were doing giveaways or discounts or what have you, right? So over discounting and desperation marketing can create long-term problems. I actually interviewed the chief marketing officer, the first chief marketing officer for Chick-fil-A. I'll put a link in the show notes, and he talks about some of these things that they did in the beginning to create long-term value, not create long-term problems. Number 6, the smartest organizations stay rational when the numbers get uncomfortable. They stay rational when the numbers are uncomfortable. That, my friends, is true leadership in your office. So if you are Chicken Little and the sky is falling, you're going to have to take 2 steps back and really get rational with it. Like, it's going to get uncomfortable, but you got to get rational and look at it. That's where true leadership is. So if your team is halfway through the season and the numbers don't look the way that you had hoped, don't panic. You got to diagnose the situation first. Context does matter, but look at your pacing. Look at where you are versus where you were last year at this point, as far as your games and your promotions, what happened the first half of the year with weather. Like, all of that tells the story. You got to figure out what's actually broken, what is still recoverable, and whether you need optimization or an entirely different strategy the rest of the way. Honestly, the ability to evaluate clearly under pressure is what separates great organizations from reactive ones. So if this episode made you rethink how your team evaluates pacing, ticket sales strategies, share it with someone who's just like you, working in sports, trying to sell more tickets and grow their fan base. If you found value in this episode, I appreciate you if you would pop on over and share a rating or review on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify. It would mean the world to me, but more importantly, this podcast would get in front of more people who are just like you, people who are trying to sell more tickets and grow your fan base. So in the show notes, there's going to be a couple things. The interview that I did with the chief marketing officer at Chick-fil-A, Steve Robinson, wonderful human being. We could have talked for 4 hours. Awesome guy. But I'm also going to have a template in there that you can just download. Free. You don't even have to give me your email address, but you can click over and download it, and this will give you kind of a mock-up, a write-up of kind of day one all the way through, and you could input your day your ticket sales go on, and then you can see where you are day by day of ticket sales and your goal, and you will have a better vision of where you are and what you should be doing moving forward. And that, my friends, is how you avoid the panic. That's how smart teams really do when sales are stalling. And that's really the hard truth about falling behind pace and what you should do to get out of the hole. Until next time.